Welcome everybody to another episode of Pierce Brothers. I'm Jake. Today we're doing an episode on the Browning high power pistol. I'm going to go over, going to be kind of a review with history. I've got quite a few different examples laid out here we'll talk about. Just kind of a review, history, talk about reliability, what you can do to, modifications that you can make to them, to make them more user-friendly, all that type of stuff. So the Browning high power started off as a request by the French military for a new service handgun they were looking to develop. They wanted John Browning, to design one for them. Caliber, he chose 9mm caliber. It had to have like a capacity over 10 rounds. They had certain weight requirements. He started working on it. He ended up dying in the 1920s, and he was working on it with conjunction with a Belgian designer from the FN factory, Mr. Saïve. I can't pronounce his name correctly, so excuse my pronunciation. But he's after Browning's death, he finished the design. The design is more closely, I would say, he had probably more influence on it than Browning. If you look at Browning's prototypes and stuff, it's probably, he took Browning's project and really kind of refined it, put a lot of his design elements and stuff into it. So both of them had a hand in it, but Mr. Saïve probably did more work on it than Browning. So we got quite a few different examples laid out here, but the Belgian military ended up adopting it in 1935. Before that, they had some trials versions and stuff from the perfected design in the early 30s. There was a couple thousand of them made. They had an oval ejection port. The Belgian military, of course, liked the gun a lot and decided to adopt it, but they had a few changes that needed to be made. They had a squared off ejection port and a few other changes, and officially adopted it and went into production in 1935. This one here is a pretty early gun, first year production. I've done some modifications to this one myself. When I got it, it didn't have original grips, and it wasn't all that reliable when I first got it. So since it didn't have original grips, I went ahead and replaced it with these Hogue grips. They're pretty thin, and they make the gun feel a million times better. Most higher power grips are kind of these squared, blocky things that they don't feel all that great in the hand. These grips changed the entire outlook of the gun. It feels way better with these on it. So I did that. It needed a new safety. The old one was almost to the point where if you had the safety engaged and pulled the trigger, the sear would almost slip off. So had quite a bit of playing the safety. So I fit new safety to it, replace the extractor, and tune that. Jack's Gun Parts makes a really good extractor for the early models with the internal extractor. So if you have issues with one, I would definitely look at one of his extractors. It took a little modification to tune it up correctly. Works really good now. And the barrel, I've still got the original barrel, but didn't feel like shooting it out. So I got one of the BH Spring Solutions barrels and had to do some modifications to make it fit one of the early high powers. It was a drop-in fit with later high powers, but took some modification to get it to fit this. So mostly dealing with the recoil lug area. Okay, so the high power 1935 was a revolutionary design. It introduced a couple different things. One was it had a 13-round double stack 9mm magazine. This was a huge improvement over other handgun designs of the era. Like the 1911 had a 7-round magazine capacity. The German Luger had an 8-round. The P38, again, 8 rounds. The Russian TT33, 8 rounds. So, you kind of get the drift. This was, pretty significant advantage in 1935 to have a handgun that held 13 rounds. Another thing was it introduced the linkless barrel design. So it took Browning's designs from, say the 1911 had that barrel link, and it upgraded it to a linkless design that like you see on most handguns, like a Glock. It has a linkless barrel design, so that was a pretty significant change as well. So, a very influential handgun in 1935. This one, of course, is a Belgian military model. Like I said, first year production, 1935. Runs really good. I've got a couple thousand rounds to this gun now with that replacement barrel, and runs really good after my tune-up. So the next part of the high power story is so World War II started in 1939. Belgium remained neutral, but until 1940 when the Germans invaded Belgium, and of course they fought to defend their country, but Germans occupied the country in 1940, and they took over the FN factory and started producing high powers under their occupation. And this is a German high power built under German occupation. So it's got the Nazi proofs on it. This one was made in 1943. The Germans mostly, these were used a lot by the Waffen SS and the German paratroopers. Got these. Again, it was a favorite of the German military because of that magazine capacity. You know, you had 13 rounds, better than anything else on the battlefield at the era. So, now, another interesting part about the high power history is Mr. Saïv actually escaped German occupation and made it to England, and he took the blueprints with him. Actually, like kind of smuggled it in his clothing and escaped Belgium when it was being occupied. And eventually, kind of a long story, but short of the story is, a company in Canada called Inglis got the blueprints and started producing high powers. Originally under the request by the Chinese government. This is a Chinese contract high power here. Got quite a bit of pitting. A lot of the Chinese high powers saw quite a bit of service in that humid climate and just not the best cared for guns. But yeah, so they originally wanted high powers, and they wanted this tangent sight. That was one thing the Chinese really liked, was the tangent sight and the shoulder stock cut. That's something the original Belgian guns had too. So they always had the shoulder stock cut and adjustable sight out to like 500 meters. The Chinese wanted those two features. The British SOE was interested in the handgun as well because it wasn't a standard military issued handgun at the time for the British military. And they purchased a few thousand of them, which is one just like this. They wanted just standard fixed sights like that and no shoulder stock cut. So this was an SOE contract gun, one of the first couple thousand made with those features there. The British military ended up adopting it as well, and the Canadian military, and they wanted just the standard fixed sights as well. They did press some of the Chinese contract guns into service when they weren't delivered to China. So you will see some of those being used. These were mostly used by, like I said, the SOE, which was stands for the Special Operations Executive. They were basically agents that were parachuted into occupied countries. So like France, Belgium, countries like that, and were tasked with like sabotage, training resistance fighters, that type of stuff. So that's pretty cool. And then also the British paratroopers used them quite a bit throughout the war, later part of the war. The Germans, like you see with this one, I forgot to mention, when they first started producing guns, they had both these features. So they had the tangent sight and the shoulder stock cut, but as production went on, they eliminated those features pretty quick. First, they eliminated the stock cut, and you will see quite a few German-occupied guns that still have the tangent sight without the shoulder stock cut. And eventually, they just went to standard fixed sights like this. So this one was made in 1943. By 1943, they had eliminated those features. And late 1943, early 1944, they removed the magazine disconnect, which all the FN guns or Belgian guns had a magazine disconnect safety in them. Same with the English guns. The Germans viewed it as unnecessary at that point of the war. So interesting gun used by both sides in World War II. After the war, of course, it was used and widely adopted by nations all around the world after World War II. Some sources say up to like 90 different nations have used it. And so this one's a 1960s era T-series high power. A lot of collectors consider these some of the best high powers made. They had a really nice polished blued finish. This one's got a little pitting and stuff. I got it for a pretty good deal because of that. This is a fairly rare one because it's got the tangent sight on it. They did a small run with those. Again, I've got the replacement grips on there from Hogue. Those just feel really good. When I got it, it had replacement grips anyway. And I did do a trigger action job on this one. So I took out most of that take-up. Most high powers have quite a bit of take-up in the trigger, so this one hits the sear pretty quickly and has a pretty nice break. And I do remove the magazine safety on all mine. I put them in a little bag, so if I ever need to put them back in, it's pretty simple. So this is another one made in 1970 or the 1970s. It's a C series. Again, I did an action job on this one, and this trigger breaks really, really, really nice. It feels a lot lighter than it is. I think it's still measuring around 6 pounds, but it breaks really crisp and doesn't have much. Has a little take up and breaks really crisp. So I could have gone lighter on the trigger pull, but I left standard weight springs in there, so it still has a full power mainspring and sear spring. So I could get that trigger pull lighter if I needed. Another interesting one. This is a 1990s era Mark III high power that was Israeli contract. Most of the Israeli contract guns have this black paint finish, and most of them have been scratched to, really scratched up. This one's no exception. They make good using guns just for, throwing in a truck or something, and you don't have to worry about beating up one of your good high powers. So in the 1990s, of course, these are considered Mark III high powers. They were introduced in early 90s. In my opinion, probably some of the best high powers made if you're wanting a good using gun. They've got feed ramps that'll feed all types of hollow points. Slides and frames are generally better steels. Accuracy is generally better than any other generation. They have external extractors, which they actually added those in the 60s, 1962 or 64. I'd have to go back and look again. But that was a huge, huge upgrade. That's one of the biggest disadvantages with these early guns. The extractor springs or extractors are not, they're an internal extractor, and they're kind of small and weak compared to a 1911 extractor, so they're easily bent and just not nearly as durable as a 1911 extractor. So that's the biggest disadvantage with those. External extractors are a huge improvement in my opinion. So this one, again, they did another run with Mark III high powers with the tangent sight in the 90s. Did a really nice polished blued finish. They did upgrade the sight, so you got a thicker front sight and a actual squared off notch rear in the back, which gives you a really good sight picture. I've taken this and gone out to 150 yards, and it seems to track pretty well. So I'll just adjust it, and I should probably one of these days take it out to 500 and just see how accurate it is, at that distance, and see how accurate the sight is to that distance. So this is an interesting one. This is one of my carry guns, but in the early 2000s, FN did a small batch of these, and you will see they have the FN logo there because these were actually built and assembled at the FN factory. A lot of the high power, the Mark IIIs, you'll see made in Belgium, assembled in Portugal, because a lot of them were assembled in Portugal. These ones had this special system called the SFS. It stands for Safe Fast Shooting. It was an attempt to make the high power safer for carry. So you basically, what you do is you chamber around, push on the back of the hammer, and it just drops forward, and no trigger pull will set it off. It's as safe as a double action gun, but it's still technically a condition 1 gun, because you draw, and when you take off the safety, the hammer pops back, and you're ready to fire. So kind of an interesting thing. Some people think it's a gimmick. I actually like it. I carry this gun quite a bit, and I like it for the safety of it. So that's kind of a rough history of the high power. By today's standards, some people are thinking it's getting a little long in the tooth. I can see that in some regards. Most of them don't have a rail. Again, they're not optics cut. Some people really like that stuff, especially for a duty gun. There are some factory guns now being made by Girsan out of Turkey that have a rail and are optics cut. So this is just one of their standard guns. Got this a few months ago, been shooting it quite a bit. And so these are made in Turkey and come in at a really good price. And really good guns so far. I've been pretty impressed with the quality, and so that's always an option. If you want a rail and optics cut, you can pick up one of the Girsan guns and have those features right out of the box. So I've been shooting that, and another company making a really good high power clone is Springfield Armory. They came out with this a few years ago. It's their SA35, and they tried to upgrade the high power a little bit, so they redesigned the hammer back here. The ring hammers generally bite people. They made it a little thinner right up here in this part, so it doesn't bite you in that beaver tail area. They upgraded the sights, gave you good grips. These are almost as good as the Hogue grips, so it feels really good. They did delete the magazine disconnect from the factory, so that's a pretty big plus. They have forged frames and slides, and yeah, I've had this one for a few months, been shooting it, and really like it. So these are two options. If you don't want to spend the cost to get an actual FN or Browning gun, these are pretty good competitive options for not all that much money. So yeah, so that's I did forget to mention shoulder stocks. A couple different options here for the original guns. This one is one of the Chinese contract stocks, but they just slide on like this, slide on the back, and you have like a little carbine. It was more like meant to be, you'd have a handgun, but also for like a personal defense weapon to extend your range a little bit, you know. So and it works. I've used these stocks, and it definitely helps you stabilize and makes longer shots easier. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, anyways, thanks for watching this video. We will talk to you guys later.